Welcome to Almost Pro, the podcast that explores the stories behind the athletes, coaches, and high performers who gave everything to sport and the moments that shaped who they became beyond it. Today's guest is Olympic gold medalist Rosie Popa. Rosie represented Australia in rowing at the Tokyo Olympic Games, where she and her crew won gold in the women's four, achieving the dream that so many athletes spend their entire lives chasing. Rosie is a winner by all measures. But this conversation isn't really about winning, it's about what winning can cost. Behind Rosie's 15-year rowing career was a much deeper battle with performance. She worked through performance anxiety, burnout, external validation, perfectionism, identity, and the pressure of growing up as the daughter of Olympic medalists. This episode is about the emotional and psychological costs of ambition, the paradox of reaching the top, and what it means to rebuild yourself when the structure of elite sport disappears. Welcome to Almost Pro, Rosie.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful intro. I really appreciate such kind words. I'm so looking forward to this conversation today.
Fun for us is trying to get our intros down in word count because your story's phenomenal. You've walked an incredible journey. And for our listeners, we ask our guests for some photos of life moments or headshots or kind of anything that sort of describes them in pictures. And Rosie, what stood out for us when we opened your photos was there is no shortage of big life moments. My goodness.
Thank you.
Hey, why don't you talk to us about, let's start at sort of the growing up phase and not the very beginning of sport for you, but what it meant to grow up around excellence.
Yeah, I think it's such a good question to ask. And I was talking to a friend about it the other day. I think, when your family, friends, and the people that you grow up that are kind of your extended almost family are like the awesome foursome and other people that are Olympians, I think, as I've developed and kind of moving out of the sport world, realizing that growing up around Olympians is not normal. And I think it's one of those things that now moving into the corporate world and I'm now working at Bunnings, but actually, the environment that you place yourself and how that can either elevate you into ways that you just like, if it's just the norm, then you will kind of go to that extra step. And I've also been in other environments that kind of haven't been as impressive as like kind of the ones that I've grown up in, and how that can kind of like pull you down and stuff like that. So I think kind of growing up in an environment where, you're doing the best version of yourself. And as we said in the intro, my parents were Olympic medalists and they're rowing coaches now. But, they were always really encouraging of me to be the best version of myself. And I think because they had kind of gone through that evolution of being a sports person and they're like that person who you are on the inside is so much more. If you're doing the work and you're being the best version of yourself every single day, the results will speak for themselves, whatever that ends up being. And I think, knowing that if you fail or if things don't work out, then that's okay. It's what you learn from it. And I think growing up in excellence, that was like the big thing that I always kind of was embedded in me, of just being that, just showing up every single day. But also, what can you learn for when things don't work out and how do you hold yourself accountable? But then also, how do you bring other people up around you? Because to be in a high performing environment, everyone has to be high performers, right? So that was like the paradox that I learned to kind of navigate my way through over the last few years, of like the funny thing about imposter syndrome, right? Because if you're around really impressive people, you're probably going to feel a little bit uncomfortable at times because you kind of have to keep stepping up. And how do you put yourself in a position where, instead of thinking of it's a scary thing to be around really impressive people, be like, oh, well, I'm here too. I'm also someone that can inspire others. So yeah, I think when that's like your baseline, but then, having parents that are, still needed to do the dishes and make your bed and all these other really normal things, I think I learned in high performing environments as well, also a lot of normal stuff that comes with it as well. So yeah, just a very unique upbringing, but I wouldn't want it any other way.
Love that. I love that. Well, so you were a multi-sport athlete as well, right?
Yeah, so I was a really keen basketball player when I was younger. So played at quite a high level and was on a basketball scholarship in high school, but I actually had quite a near career-ending injury in the middle of high school. And I think that was probably one of the first ones where I wanted to be a really, really successful basketball player, and then not being able to just do what I was able to do before the injury. I think that was something that really I probably didn't process for a really long time. But when I moved into rowing, obviously kind of that's in the wheelhouse of where my parents played, but I think it was kind of, developing in that way, but also I don't think I actually ever mourned the loss of that until after I finished sport completely. Basketball was probably one of my true love sports, but I didn't really have the time because I kind of transferred over to rowing quite quickly. So yeah, it's an interesting one of like the kind of way that you play basketball is very different to rowing. And I think that's kind of what I brought into the rowing of that like genuine camaraderie, which I love. I think that's quite rare in the sport of rowing. So yeah, lots of things that we can learn from so many different parts of our lives.
From the brief amount that you've shared so far and from the history that we know, your story is not only incredible, it's also just captivating from what we understand so far from the very beginning to present day. You are part of history now, which is the
Thank you.
coolest thing in my opinion. Anyway, there are very
Wow,
few
thank
people
you.
in this world that can say that they are Olympic medalists, even less that can say that they're Olympic gold medalists, and even less that can say that they are record holders. And it's a privilege to share this space with you, really. I think
Thank you, Laura.
what stands out for me in your upbringing in this environment of elite sport and excellence is a balance that you've kind of had to play all the way
Mm,
along. And I'm curious when everything started for you in terms of sport. So basketball early on and rowing. Was this self-driven? Were you
mm,
intrinsically motivated to go after sporting achievements? Or was this more, okay, the family does this, so
mm.
I'm in? But what was that like for you?
It's so complicated, right? Because as all good consultants, it's yes and no. The answer is I think when we chatted last week, there's so much paradox that comes with these environments, right? And like I'm kind of a bit of a hippie girl at heart, like I'd love when I was a kid, I was making daisy chains and I remember I used to do karate and like I was so big, so I'm about 6 foot, but I was really like developmentally quite enormous is an understatement when I was a child. And yeah, I was playing karate and I remember mum used to be like, "What are you doing?" Because like when we were sparring, when I was in competitions, I would feel really self-conscious of my height and my bigness that I would let the other girls beat me because I didn't want to hurt them, So it's like that's kind of this like my inner sanctum of my soul is quite like a gentle, don't really want to hurt many people. And like not, I'm probably not a competitive the irony is not lost on me, but I think, like, I'm actually not a super competitive person in my day-to-day life. Like, if you're playing a board game, I don't I kind of
So
just wanna play.
a real team player, not so much a
Uh,
solo sport.
Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha.
yeah, or just, like, I just especially in rowing, I think what I had to learn was like it's an offensive sport, right? So no, there's actually nothing that I can do in defense. Like I can't defend my position. I have to. There's nothing you can do in rowing. You're in your lane, and I think with basketball, there's this like art of working together, and obviously, like even in defense, you can impact. But there's so many like different tactics, and I love like the interesting element of like the team network in basketball. And then I think I lost my way probably in my, early 20s. I actually did move to the States and I did my undergrad degree at the University of California, Berkeley, and I was on the rowing team there. And I think that I had to, because I was technically quite good, but I had to like really learn to find the grit, which I think is like a wonderful thing. But I think I kind of over indexed and try to get too competitive. And also I think I started to really compare myself to others because it's like it's a really, it's a environment where you're only eligible for 4 years in the US college system, and you
Yeah.
kind of have to squeeze everything out. But also, it's just so competitive because there's so few people for very very small spots. And I think I had to kind of like learn to find that, but then I think I lost my love for what I actually was doing it for, if that makes sense. Not during Cal, but I think kind of coming back to Australia and moving into the Australian system for rowing, because I was back on the Australian team in 2015. But I think like I was trying to kind of develop too quickly rather than what are the things that I needed to do as an athlete. And I started to kind of look for external validation for people to tell me that that was good enough. And I think because it was just this switch of going away from my instincts, which is like, I kind of just want to be the best version of me. But then when you're in a high fit, like competitive environment that's really condensed, and sometimes it's kind of out of sync with your developmental pathway, because for some people that's their peak, right? Like rowing for college is an amazing achievement. But I was also had plans to go after, I wanted to row for the country after I finished. So I think the timing of it, and I think I would get caught up in like the wrong rhythms of what I needed to develop on. And I think what came of that is I felt quite out of control for a while, now that I reflect on it. And I probably used, restricted eating, or, comparing results and making that, tie up to my self-worth, or making me feel like a good or bad person, or making sure that, if the numbers were good, then I felt good about myself, and they weren't good, then I didn't feel. And I kind of just, I think, as all of us can probably relate to, because that is the metric of success in those environments. And I think the world teaches you lessons in the most extreme way, So I actually missed out on the Olympics in 2016 because I just ultimately wasn't kind of getting. I obviously didn't make the team, but I think I really got in my own way. It wasn't for a lack of talent, like I just wasn't doing it for the right reasons. So, I took some time off in 2016 and went traveling, and kind of just like when the Olympics were on in Rio, I was like on a lemon farm in the middle of Chile, like so far away, working, like, doing volunteer work, because I was like, it needs to be completely opposite. And I was like, okay, I'm going to come back to Australia, and, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it for the right reasons. And I think that kind of having that first big loss of not making the Olympics, um, it wasn't like my basketball injury where like, okay, basketball's not working out, I can go to rowing now. And it was like, no matter how hard I tried in 2016 after not getting selected, I was not going to go to the Olympics that year. Like it was so just the door was shut. And I think it's like when you reach rock bottom, sometimes you're going, okay, I need to like really do something different now. And I just made this promise to myself of like, okay, I'm going to have a crack at the 4-year cycle that ended up turning into a 5-year cycle because of the COVID pandemic. The worst case is that I have the same result, but I've done everything in my power and I love myself, and the best case is that I go to the Olympics and really be proud of my efforts. And I think I just made that commitment to be like, regardless, I'm going to take this like radical leap of faith that I'm going to get rid of all this like toxic energy and toxic like need for external validation. And that wasn't just in sport. I think that was with everything. It was in relationships, it was with school, it was with, even relationship with my parents, because they were always just like, do the best you can. But I was interpreting as like, I need to show that I'm good enough. It was like, it was so in my head, because they couldn't have been more supportive of like, if you want to stop, if it's not for you, we know how hard it is, like just walk away. So it was a real kind of almost like a reckoning to come back to myself. And it took about a year to kind of get that momentum, because I had to be so intrinsically motivated working on the things that I needed to develop, and I was not winning initially. In the first 6 months that I was back on the Australian team, like I was in the bottom rotation in a lot of things, but then quite quickly I ended up, like within the year, I ended up in the priority boat, and at the World Championships, I was right back up at the top. It seemingly came out of nowhere, but because I had just really worked on what I needed to do at the right time, it just like started to snowball, and my confidence and, all these other things, and I could kind of start to lead by example. And I think that kind of really motivated me to like, now that I'm, in the real world now, of going, at the end of the day, so much of, life is we spend every single moment with ourselves, right? Like you may as well love that moment. But I think it's, how do you do that best and cross the T's and dot the I's and whatever avenue that is in your life. And obviously you want to do well and you want to have output, but you can only control what you can control. And I think, I feel very lucky that I was able to validate it with a gold medal. And I know a lot of people don't have the ability to really, hang their hat on that. But I remember, the biggest thing for me was, I was asked this question, like, what was one of your favorite moments of your career? And I remember the night before our Olympic final, and Jess Morrison, who was the girl that sat in front of me, and we're all sitting around getting ready just to kind of wind down before the race. And she goes, like, we have done everything in our power to win this race tomorrow. She's like, if someone beats us, like, kudos to them. She's like, there's nothing else that we could have done in our training. And I was like, we have arrived, right? Like I was so not nervous for the race. I was so excited because I was like, I just want to row with my best mates and I want to have a good time and I want to just like execute what I know that we're able to do. And like, what a way to finish, your rowing career. And so
Yeah.
I think it's just, that's how I try to live my life now of like, even with getting into Oxford, like initially I was given like a conditional acceptance offer. I had to take another test and get some marks up and stuff like that. But I didn't just like fall away when things didn't work out initially. Like I kept just going, okay, that was not good enough. That's a benchmark. How do you keep moving forward? How do you kind of just like take one step at a time and breaking down something so overwhelming into manageable chunks? But I think that does come from, showing up for yourself every single day but also surrounding yourself with people that championing that, because I think, yes, intrinsic motivation is so important, but you need to have the systems around you to prop that up. And then you don't have the frictions of like getting pulled down or the tall poppy syndrome to like waste that energy. And I think that actually understanding not only what you need to do, but how do you position yourself within the environment that you're in to like, water the garden to make sure that, things continue to grow. So yeah, that's a lot of what I do in life now. So I feel very lucky that I have like the tangible output for it, but I'm hoping in a parallel universe that I would be sitting here saying the same thing if, the result was different.
Rosie, if and for everybody listening as well, just go back to where you started there. And when you're talking us through these different periods of your sporting journey in your life, you can actually hear the different mindset through each period of that time. And it's so awesome to listen to where you have come now. And I'm going to apparently recommend everyone go to the lemon farms because that re-entry
It's
into
pretty
sport
wonderful. No
is
internet. You might not be able to listen to this podcast.
I like that you went from one extreme of like training all the time, all these pressures to like, you know what, full reset, and then came back and
Absolutely.
met somewhere in the middle where you could
Mm,
achieve your goals and move forward in a more healthy way, which is just
yeah.
so awesome.
Mm,
It's and I love your story about Oxford and how you went to Oxford. And
mm,
then again, the achievements that you made within the Tokyo Olympics. You talk about your time being split between the US and Australia. It, I'm, I, I think I'm correct in saying that that was the first Olympics where the US didn't medal for rowing, but Australia medaled 4 times. So
yeah.
absolutely incredible as well with
Well,
when
you've
we
done
talk
your
about
research. Nice.
timing and
Well,
I
it's
love the Olympics, and I am a little bit of
good,
a
isn't it?
history nerd as well, and I put Francis through it as minimal amount as I can bear to hold back.
It's so interesting, right? Because I think on those 2 points, so I'm actually a dual citizen. My mum's American. And so I actually did my under 23 and a World Cup for the US when I was over there. And it was really interesting because I was talking to my coach from Cal, who's his name's Dave O'Neill. And he's one of the most successful college coaches. He's in Texas now. But I remember talking to him at like, the seniors dinner, and I was like, do I stay in, because I'd never actually rowed for Australia at that time. And I was like, because US was a powerhouse at that time. And I didn't, so rowing, so the rowing machine is like a key, we have a 2 kilometer test that's like a key indicator. It's like, one of the important things for selection. And my 2K at the time wasn't that good compared to a lot of other people. But I remember but the US really over index on that as like to get in to show your strength. That's really, really important. Um, and I was kind of on the cusp of being able to like kind of move into the US system and stay over there. And who at the time he was doing a lot of like US coaching as well. And I was talking to him, I was like, Dave, I'm not really sure, like, do I stay in the US? Because at the time the US were a powerhouse. Like they just won the gold medal for the women's 8, which is like, I was in the women's 4 for my Olympics, but the women's 8 is like my favorite event. Like it's just in terms of talking about camaraderie and just like the electricity of it. Um, and I just love like the US has been notoriously really good at, or historically really good at that event. And he was like, honestly, Rosie, he goes, you need to go home. He goes, your 2K is not good enough, which is like one thing, but he's like, be around your family, be in a safe environment. Like this is a long road. And if you stay over here, you're going to be like kind of in no man's land, just kind of like bumping around and, and in the homes and stuff like that. But he's like, go home, crush it in the Australian team, like make a statement, take everything that you've learned here, but like be around your family. There's so many things that are like really important, and it's like that was just such an amazing thing because I think, you know, the biggest thing from missing out on the Olympics, but then coming back was like, even going onto a lemon farm and be like, the world is so much more than sport. And
Yeah.
I think sometimes we get really like as sports buff, we can kind of get really, I guess, like in this echo chamber of seeing what sport is in reality. Like it teaches you a lot of lessons, but there's so much more out of it. And I think a lot of us can kind of feel stuck in like, what else can we do outside of that? And I think to like literally, being on a lemon farm and like, I was really useful because I'm so tall. I could like help pull the branches down for the Chilean like pickers to pick their lemons. Like that's all they cared about. I didn't care that I was a wrong, like, I don't think I even told them, and I was like, but no one, like, cares, and I think it was such a not no one cares, it's obviously an amazing thing, but, like, this is such a wonderful opportunity that we can do, that we can just, like, put ourselves out there in a safe space, and I think it just made me really grateful to have that opportunity, and it's also just hilarious, right? Like, it was almost that, like, Truman Show moment of, like, the Olympics is on, but these guys, like, don't care. They're just trying to, like, pick lemons to take their little tokens to cash out so they can go and put food on the table for their family. And I think it just like gave me so much perspective. And then on the other side of that, in terms of choice, like I went to Oxford and was actually like asked to be on the rowing team. But I was like, when I've been in educational environments, I've done the student athlete thing. Like in high school, I had to like go and do weights at lunch or had to go do extra sessions at lunch and really like wasn't focused on my social stuff. And then, yeah, for Cal, I was a student athlete, and that's kind of like you're just part of the wider athletic community. And I was like, I actually want to enjoy Oxford for being a student now, and it was a bit controversial that I chose not to, but I was like, I know in my like experience, like this is an amazing boat race opportunity, but like I'm going to be expected to be a leader in this. And I literally just want to like nerd out and go to all the talks at the MBA and like just be a full Oxonian and not have to always feel like I'm running to something else. And I think that that was a big thing of, um, realizing that I was really content with my rowing career. I was like, this would be kind of another jewel in my crown because it's kind of the only thing that I didn't do in terms of like rowing prestigious events. But I was like, I know that I would actually be taking away a seat from someone that like this is going to be the highlight of their life potentially. And for me, like I think being a good alumni is like knowing when to step aside. And so I was like, to kind of bookend both those things, I was like watching the bow race, be like, this is really cool, but I'm so happy to be on the sidelines right now. And I think like these are the evolutions of like what I'm trying to talk about now is like you can always be part of sport, right? But it doesn't actually just need to be this one dimensional like version of it. Like I've had so many different iterations of it. And now like I'm preaching to the hills, like the hilltops. So like my service in sport as being a really good alumni. Like, I don't want to be a coach. I don't want to be like on the start line in the Olympics. Like, I want people to be able to come to me and be asked to come on platforms like this and talk about the amazing elements of sport, but also understanding like like there's a lot of trade-offs and there's a lot of like things that you need to take into consider. And that doesn't mean that it's a compromise,
Mm.
but like this is our choice to be part of that. And no one is actually like holding you back that you have to do this. But I think that when we're in these institutions, you don't know any other way. And I think that like to be able to kind of choose your own adventure, like there's a lot more opportunities than you think there are, but like you're probably just going to feel a little bit more alone because you're doing things a little bit more unconventionally, if that makes sense. So yeah, I just wanted to share those little tidbits because I think hopefully if it's, someone that's feeling really stuck, but it's like there are so many different ways to go about it, but you might just, the cliche, like there's a road, but there's a little like side tracks and offshoots and side quests that you can actually take that might take you to somewhere that like you just don't even know exists yet.
There's so much we want to unpack in that. And because sport can often be about sitting or reaching for the top, right? And then when that stops, it can be really, really difficult for any athlete to go, okay, I don't need to be at the top of whatever I do next. In fact, I don't even need to be working with the top, in whatever I do next. What you're saying is so, so different to that. You're saying that there is no top or bottom. This is about being a good human to the people, systems I've come from, grew up
Yeah.
in, understand really well. And I think that's such a precious gift you're giving to the sporting community.
Thank
Please
you.
don't lose that thought because I want to come back, not before we talk about Tokyo.
And now, time for a short break. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to join the Almost Pro community and stay up to date with the latest episodes and news. To find out more or to apply to be a guest, visit almostpropodcast.com today.
Can you talk to us about your Tokyo journey? It's different.
Yeah.
How different?
I mean, I am still trying to find someone that's had a comparable experience. So, like, kind of what after. So, yeah, I think it's, I think we've talked a lot about kind of being that best version of yourself and the kindness and compassion. And I think that I also want to like highlight the fact that like when you're in it, and then you're like kind of able to be in that competition or that kind of race or the match or whatever, but like be 100% there, like I think honor that really moment where like if the fiery intensity comes into it, it's like if you want to just like push and like actually go for it, I think there's a really delicate balance to be like, no, it's okay, it'll work out. But it's like, no, when you're in it, like go for it, and like leave nothing out on the table. And I think that, the big thing for my Tokyo experience, which I'll kind of elaborate on a little bit later, but like, I think there's a really big difference of like kind of going, why me? Why me? Of like, do I deserve to be there? But it's like, well, somebody has to win and someone has to stand in the middle of the play. Like, why can't it be me? I think that I really changed that mindset of, especially coming back from, the lemon farm, I guess, when I came back onto the Australian team in 2017. But I think I've really changed that mindset of like, don't talk about if I'll be on the Australian team, but like when I'll be on the Australian team, and not like, if I make the team, but it's like, what boat am I going to be in? Just like really having that real growth mindset and like stepping into the challenge. So yeah, I came back to rowing in 2017, and actually joined the National Training Centre, which was newly established. It's in Penrith in New South Wales. So Mrs. Gina Reinhart um, like helped fund a national training centre, and such an amazing opportunity to actually be completely funded and being able to focus on the rowing because everything else was taken care of, which is just, considering I'd never been paid $1 before that, was amazing. Um, and then, yeah, so I was on this team and I ended up in the women's 8 in 2018 and 2019, and we got a bronze medal in 2018, and then we got a silver medal in 2019. So we're moving a bit closer and closer, but that was not the same boat class that I ended up being in Tokyo. But then at the start of 2020, the end of 2019, I'm not sure if you guys remember, we had the bushfires that ripped through, and I was right near the Blue Mountains, which was pretty much on fire. So we actually couldn't grow for a long time then. And I also had quite a serious back injury at the time. So I was managing like quite a bad back injury where my SIJ joint, which is the one right above your coccyx, like just completely ruptured in a nice way. Like it just was like quite a big injury. And then we had the bushfires, so we actually couldn't row leading into the end of 2019. So there was actually points where we moved to Tasmania because to get away from the smoke inhalation. But it was also at days, and like I'm not sure if anyone's actually been to Penrith in New South Wales, but I remember like rowing or going to training, it was nearly like 50 degrees at some point. Like the world just the Mother Nature just kind of was ripping through. So we had that disruption leading into 2020, and then I actually had worked my way into the women's 4, which was kind of the top ranked boat at that time, for 2020, and we had the selections, which was like a grueling week. At the training center, there's only 25 women, and I would say like 18 make the team. But of the side, so I rode with one all. And of that 25, I actually was only eligible for like 7 of those slots, if that makes sense. So I made the women's 4, and so we were selected in that boat for 2 weeks, but then COVID hit. Obviously, we were at a trading center, which was counted as a gym facility, so that had to shut down. And there was also rumors that the Olympics would be cancelled. So I just remember that we had actually a training session that morning, in early March, and they were like, okay, weights is going to be cancelled, which is the second session. We have to just have a kind of a conference with the high performance director. And he was pretty much like, look, at this point, we don't know if the Olympics is going to go ahead. We're going to keep you as well informed as possible, but like you kind of have to go back to your home states, and like we don't know, the borders are going to shut, so you kind of have to be gone in the next 48 hours. So I'd been living there for 3 or 4 years with some other of the athletes in a house in Penrith.
Mm.
So we just like packed up our bags and our lives and putting into a storage unit, and then I just drove home. And then they were like, okay, so each individual state has like institutes of sport. So the VIS, Victorian Institute of Sport here, helped me out and all the other athletes, and they gave her like a full gym facility kit worth of stuff. So I had an ergo, I had a watt bike, I had a squat rack and kettlebells and dumbbells and stuff. And so I set up a little gym in my parents' backyard with a marquee, which I bought from Bunnings. And like the irony is that I actually work for Bunnings right now. So I was like, I feel very emotionally attached to the company because they literally gave me a shelter in the middle of Melbourne winter. And I just trained on my own in the backyard for like 6 months with at my parents' house. They own a property probably a couple k's away, so I actually lived, because they were like, we need to separate the training from where you sleep, because like when it's too close. So we had the luxury of, that's another amazing thing of having them, was like, how do we kind of create that I'm almost like going to work kind of feeling, and that it's not just I'm looking at an ergo all the time. And so, yeah, my routine was like, it was like 3Ks that I would kind of either walk or run to my parents' house from St Kilda, and would do my day of training there and spend time with them. And then I would walk back. So that was like my little bubble. That was probably for a few months. And then at the end of winter, Jess Morrison, who I mentioned before, that ended up being in my crew, she lives quite close as well. And we ended up, well, it was not very legal, but I ended up kind of going to her house, and we started to train together in the facility that she kind of had set up. But the beauty of it was that we were, of those 7 spots that we had, like we were the top 2 of those people. Like we were in direct competition of each other.
Wow.
But she was the top ranked person, and I was kind of second or kind of third-ish at the time. And I just remember thinking, wow, like this is going to be kind of daunting, because I'm going to be around someone that's better than me, right? Like I think we kind of can shy away from the people that are outperforming us.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, just try to keep up with Jess. That was my mindset of like, bro, Rosie, if you want to like kind of elevate it, this is the best environment of being like, put yourself right in the belly of the beast, because like what's going to happen when you're like trying to do your best around competitors.
Mhm.
But we became like best mates during that time, because I think we were kind of had this really healthy working rhythm, that we like kind of knew that we were pitted against each other, but like we were just getting so much, we pushed each other so much, because I think it actually ended up being so like, because we just adored each other, and we just wanted to see how much we could push. And we would just be having dinner and be like, let's not, because the bow side is the side that I'm on, that we're on. It's like, well, we don't want to be, it's actually her birthday today. Happy birthday, Jess. But
Happy
we don't want to be the best bow siders in Australia. Like we want to be the best bow siders in the world. And I think that kind of cracked open, because Jess has quite a worldly life as well. And we were like, let's just like go into orbit right now and see what we can do. And I think that it was just such a wonderful thing of like, in terms of what let's start the conversation that we happened, was like, that was the highest performing environment that I've ever been in, because we were just like right with your competitor every single moment of every day. But then what a joy to be like in the boat with her, because I was like, fuck, like she is one of the only people that I'd want in my boat, in the world, because I don't want to be racing against her, because she's so good, like I want to be here and be in my boat. So,
Yeah.
and I think that really unlocked, my passion for like how do women actually work together, because we
Yeah.
were just like, it was such a special time. And like when we came back to the training center, and then we had, the other 2 girls, Annabelle and Lucy, who were the other 2 that were in our boat as well. Like I think we had kind of created that real unit and like connection together. And then the other 2, we'd kind of seen the 4 of us do the work over COVID, and we really elevated up. So then the 4 that I was actually selected in 2020, was different in 2021. You know, things had changed so much that that was the unit of the girls that I just mentioned before, but that was actually different to the boat that was initially selected. You know, and like these girls are my best friends in the whole world. So I was like, the world works in really mysterious ways. So yeah, we came back to Penrith, I would say probably October of 2021. And then by that time they were like, yeah, we think the Olympics are still going to be on, but like you got to come back now because you can. And then so got selected again in March of 2021. But then what happened was that we couldn't leave the country to do any international competition leading into the Olympics because of the borders were still shut. So they actually created like this almost World Cup series internally in Australia that we were kind of worked in a bubble, but you know, we would be the women's four, but we would be like racing against the men's pair and the women's quad and like the men's junior quad. And like they created like this whole ecosystem of up and coming athletes that could be kind of similar boats to the whole boat class of the Olympic team. So we traveled around to, we were in Queensland, we were in
So cool.
Adelaide, we were in the Gambia. Like it was so creative, but we
Yeah.
also were like practicing best practice for COVID safe. This was a COVID Olympics where we had to get COVID testing every morning. We had to practice. We knew the new protocols for Tokyo was that you had to wear a mask everywhere unless you were eating, sleeping, or in the boat. So like how many masks did you have to take in with you? You know, it's like all this little intricacies, but we practiced that. But then going into Tokyo, we had to fly out of Queensland. But being in New South Wales, the borders at some point between New South Wales and Queensland were going to shut, so we're going to miss our flight. So then the last night of actually me ever being in Penrith was like, we were meant to leave kind of a week later, but the borders were shutting at midnight. So we had to pack up our house really quickly again. And then I had my car in. It's so dramatic now that I said it. When you're in
It's
the
like a
moment, it's
roller
like, you know,
coaster or an
but it's
episode
like,
of like The Amazing Race or whatever that show was where they got to get from here
yeah,
to there. Yeah.
but imagine like you're also trying to prepare for your debut Olympics in the priority boat. Like all this other shit's happening, right? And maybe that was good because you just couldn't focus on being nervous, you know, then it was just like you're just doing what you can. But you know, like the borders were shutting and my car was in New South Wales, but I was going to go back to Victoria after the Olympics. So like my parents just jumped on a flight. They were going to come visit at some point, but they couldn't. So they actually jumped on a flight that morning. I said hello to them for 10 minutes and then they picked up my car and drove straight home. Like they just kind of went above and beyond to create just like, let's get everything out of the way, right?
Right.
So like that was one thing. So we had to flee kind of to ACT to get on a flight to go to Queensland for a pre-departure camp, which was in Rockhampton. And so we were there for a few weeks finally. And then when we actually got to go to the Olympics, you're only allowed to enter 5 days before.
Yeah.
So usually you get a lot more preparation. So I think in terms of prep in Australia, I was like, we need to get all our nerves out. We need to get all the fears, all the doubts, all of that crap out, because when we land, it's pretty much all systems go. So that was actually getting into the Olympics. So luckily no one got COVID then. But then we were also had the extra challenge. So of the 4 that I was in, 2 of the girls were actually competing in another event, which is really rare for rowing. So we knew on the heat, we had practiced also that like on the heat day on the first morning that the heats were only 2 hours apart. So we had to rehearse how we would get ready for both those races. And initially the semi-final for the women's pair, which was what Jess and Annabelle were in, was meant to be the day before our women's 4 final. But Mother Nature was not kind again. An actual typhoon had come through the day before, which cancelled racing on the semi-final day, which pushed the semi-final of the women's pair to 2 hours after the women's 4 final. So the night before our race, we had to just figure out how was that going to work, you know. So we came down and we obviously won our race, which was amazing, but we had to come straight back off because Jess and Annabelle had to cool down to warm back up to get back on the water to go back up. But we also had to be on the podium as well. So I think it's like, you know, the first thing that I said when we crossed the line was like, we need to get off the water so Jess and Annabelle can cool down. So it's like, you know, I think that but like, you know, it's all just so extreme, right? But I think in terms of that, what it came down to was like, you know, there was no crowds, there was no parade. We had to leave the next day. because we had to go back to hotel quarantine in Sydney. And then I came back to Australia and it was 6 months of lockdown. We didn't get the opening closing ceremony. We didn't get the first class tickets back on the Qantas flight, the medalists. But I think it was so extreme. But I think like the biggest learnings that I had, because I was also in the process mode, like of the Olympics, is like, I kind of wish I'd celebrated more like in that actual moment, because I was like, went straight into, I've got to be a good teammate, but I don't think I actually was able to kind of relish in that moment for myself, if that makes sense. Because I
Right.
was like, we've got to get off. And I was like, I kind of just wish I'd like really been able to like be in that moment. But you're so in the process, understandably.
Particularly at this
Um,
moment, you've just been through having to basically focus on logistics for all of
yeah,
the upcoming weeks to the event. It's no surprise really that your mind was still in that gear of, okay, next thing, next thing,
totally.
next thing. Like, yeah.
Totally. And I think that, like, that's been the biggest learning in terms of when we started this conversation of like the slowing down and everything, is like there can be a lot of amazing things that happen in like concurrent things, but like when do you actually just like stop, and even if it's for 10 seconds, right? But that mindset of like, this is a moment. Like it's not just been like logistically, yeah, I'm going to do this. And it's like, no, but you have arrived at this moment. Like this is what living is for. And I think it's almost like going traveling and trying to see too many things at once. Like, that's how I try to like really think about my life now, is like, even coming back, I think I was in this almost trying to stay in that intensity of kind of feeling like I could just like stay in that gear, like going to KPMG and then going to Oxford and then coming back. And then when I first got back, it was like, shit, like what's next? I'm really tired. Like I'm really burnt out. And so I spent the last like all of 2025 going like, you have done a really amazing things, but I almost just was so oversaturated that like at the end of Oxford, I was like, yeah, cool, another like black tie event, or, like it's such a but I'm like, it's such an amazing thing. And I think, you know, I've really loved all those experiences now, but I think it's almost like this delayed processing of it all. And I think that what I'm trying to encourage people now is like, you can do all these things, but you can't do it at the same time. And I think like you can do these things in a really short, like moment in time, but how do you give yourself that time after to really like marinate and be like, what did I learn from it? Like, what are the good things? What were the things that like weren't so good? And what can I do differently now? And I think that that's where I'm at, whereas like I have a really exciting job now and life's going really well, but I'm trying not to like sprint straight away. I'm trying to just like ease my way into things. Whereas I think, sometimes we can kind of have that of like, if this opportunity doesn't come up again, it's never going to be, which in sport, it is such a finite period of time. Whereas like, I'm going to be working for a long time now. Like I don't have to really rush through life anymore, because like in sport, it's like you peak at 29 and
Yeah.
everything after that's kind of diminished returns, or like you only get a max of 2 to 3 Olympics that you can have a crack at, where I'm like, the metrics have changed now and I love that. But it took a long time to be like, okay, just because that mindset worked in that environment, like, yes, I could kind of copy and paste that into this, but I actually want to commit to doing things differently now. So there's definitely been like a lot of softness and like a lot of really big introspection. But I think like coming back into the sport world now, of like understanding the extreme nature of it, understanding that it is a game, but also understanding that you have the accountability and choice to be in that, and like what can you do to like be in that environment to like get the most out of yourself and not feel like it's always like a slog or an obligation all the time. I think you just have to do the best with what you can in the moment. So yeah, long-winded way of saying Tokyo was extreme, and I don't know how you could bucket that into like, if is that a good or a bad experience. It just was this really intense extreme moment of time.
Massive, massive. And you're measuring contrasts now, right? You're looking at what that was and learning to sit in what it
Yeah,
was, and no take backs, right? So moments have passed without question, but there's still room for reflection, there's still room
totally.
for acknowledgement, there's still room for two people on the opposite end of your camera right now to be in absolute awe and wonder way
Yeah.
that you've approached these major milestones in your life. And I think we can all be guilty of skipping forward. We can all be guilty
Mm,
of going, yeah, we did that thing, or achieved that thing, and so now what? What's next?
mm,
Um, And you know that that's happened at different points in your life. I think Laura summed up pretty accurately how easily that might have happened for anyone in the Tokyo environment that you were
Totally.
in what
Totally.
was just exceptional world circumstances. So, to even be able to pivot and be there and do the things that you needed to do, like packing your life up more than once,
Mm,
says a lot about your character. It's a testament to who you deeply are. I
yeah.
love this phase for you now because I think, I said at the beginning, you sent us through some photos that we'd asked for, and we'll spend a bit of time at the deliberation table wondering which of those wondrous moments, best depicts where you are. I wonder if it's not the one that we would take of you today. If you got the chance to say to people, healthy for me today looks like, how would you finish?
Mm.
And I suppose, um, m how do you balance being proud of what you've achieved, while at the same time recognizing it doesn't need to be achievement-based going forward?
Yeah. I think, well, thank you for such kind words. I think like one thing that, I think a lot about is like really honor the past, but don't let it hold you back. And I think that we can get caught up in a lot of like the good and bads of things. And I think, when we were chatting last week, it's like, how do we sit in these like kind of non-binary ways of thinking of like, the way for me, healthy and like something I'm kind of moving into this like adjacent wellness space. I don't even know of like what is actually healthy to me. Like it's a really big question that I think about. But for me, it's kind of like that balance, but also like taking accountability of like you understanding your needs in any moment of time. So it's like, yeah, you can be really like physically healthy, but you're doing it for the wrong reasons. That's not healthy. Or like, if you're resting, but then it ends up tipping over into just like kind of being apathetic. That's not, I think it's actually like being so in touch with your individual needs, but also like how can you contribute and help others along the way. And I think I think healthy for me is not actually a set and forget thing. I think it's actually just honoring where you are at the time and just like at the end of the day, just having that like unconditional love towards yourself. Because I think you can't really be a good partner or a good parent or a good colleague or a good anything, and you can't support anyone else until you kind of have that self leadership first and really like holding yourself accountable to like what you need and not waiting for other people. And so yeah, I think the big thing that I'm trying to communicate, especially to athletes, is like, yes, we have been in institutionalized environments now, but that was then and this is now. And what actions and accountabilities can you take to like step into the life that you want? And you actually doesn't need to like represent what anyone else has done before. And I think that that's the big thing that I'm trying to like, really unpick in like the athlete retirement plays is like, but what people that want to stay in sport and be a coach is really different than the ones that want to be a doctor or want to, be a parent or, like all these other things. So it's like each to your own, but like lean into it. Like you don't have to explain to anything, but like absolutely love that step that you're doing. So yeah, and I think just also knowing that it's going to take a little bit of time to understand what healthy is as well, or like what you want. I definitely feel like I used to try to rush to find answers instead of like letting kind of, you know, keep just trying to iterate over time. So that's kind of the things that I'm really trying to communicate is like being really patient, but like staying really authentic to yourself and not like a performative way. But also being able to ask for help if you really need it. So yeah, I preach the hilltop, like go to therapy, figure it out, take
Yeah,
that accountability, and just knowing that you're part of something bigger than yourself. And if you move away from sport, like it doesn't mean that, or you're not an athlete anymore, it doesn't mean that you can't be involved in sport
I
or
love
anything.
that.
And
Absolutely love that. That's such valuable
yeah,
and grounded advice for everyone.
thank
Everybody's
you so
journey
much.
is different, everybody's outcome is different. And to come
Yeah,
through on the other side of sport looks different for everyone. And
yeah.
as long as we can live, as you said, as our authentic selves,
Mm,
and make the most of every situation, and take things at our own pace. That is just such good advice. We are
appreciate that.
now, Rosie, going to
Mm.
shift gears just a little and add a little bit of pressure to your day. Not much, just a little bit of pressure.
Okay.
We're gonna play a fun game that we tag on to the end of our episodes called This or That. So you'll
Okay.
be given two options, and all you need to do is just choose whichever the first one that comes to mind that sits well with you.
Okay.
Ready to play?
Let's go for it.
Let's do it. Okay, here we go. Training day or race day?
Race day.
Ice bath or massage table?
Oh, massage table.
Motivation or discipline?
Discipline.
Yeah, I like that. All right, I might know the answer to this one, but team boat or individual boat?
Team. Don't have to think
And
about it.
I'm going to go structured routine or complete freedom.
Oh, I'm gonna say routine.
I wasn't sure if the lemon farm was going to win, so I had to throw that one in there.
Well, it's because you can create some really fun structures, right?
That's true. That's true. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Being coached or coaching yourself?
I mean, is it a good coach?
Yeah, good question.
Good question.
I would say coaching myself.
Yep. Process or outcome?
Process.
And the last one, high performance or high fulfillment?
High fulfillment.
Yeah, I love it. Thanks for playing this or that, Rosie. That was a lot
Oh
of
my
fun.
God, love that. That's fun. Thanks, guys.
Hey, Rosie, thank you. Thank you for
Thank you.
sharing the studio with us today, for allowing us to step into just a piece of your heart and your mind for a little
Yeah, so
while.
kind. Thank
It's
you. No,
it,
I
it
really
has
appreciate
been
it.
a pleasure.
Thank you so much, and love what you guys are doing. I think just giving the platform for people to share their story. I think storytelling is something that is a forgotten art, and obviously we're kind of all bought into it. But I think that knowledge sharing and kind of giving insight and different ways to go about it is just one of the most important ways that you can learn. So I thank you for the opportunity and good luck with everything. I'm sure you guys are going to have many more interesting conversations ahead.
Well, folks, that was Rosie Popa. This conversation has felt like a really honest exploration of something that in sport that the reality that achievement and fulfillment are not always the same thing, that there can be more to everybody's story. Rosie's story reminds us that even when you're reaching the absolute pinnacle of your sport, it doesn't magically resolve all other answers to the rest of your life. So maybe one of the hardest transitions of all is learning who you are when all of that is no longer your everyday. For us, for Laura and I, what makes Rosie's perspective so powerful is not just that off air we had a little fangirl moment about an Olympic gold medalist being part of our almost pro family, but her willingness to talk openly about the internal battles, the commitment to redefining success, but the commitment to just always being authentic. And if you didn't feel that from Rosie, you might want to rewind, because we felt it from the moment we first met her. Folks, if you enjoyed this episode, please follow, subscribe, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And as always, if you've got a story of your own, let us know. We'd love to hear from you. See you next time.